So we have the pleasure of having Katherine Bird on our podcast, next episode of Conscious Physician Medicine and Psychedelics. I had the pleasure of meeting Katherine in Denver at the bookstore at the Psychedelic Science Conference 2025 this past summer. It's so funny. We live in the same state, but we met for the first time in Denver. And so since then, Katherine, getting to know you in our next tier facilitator gatherings, it's just been such a pleasure. Getting to know that you exist in our community would have been an honor. And yeah, please tell us about you and your journey, whatever it is that you want to share.
I suppose that for me, this path was unexpected, I think, as it is for a lot of people. In my 20s, I had a very radical mystical awakening, went through very deep dark night of the soul, but also experiencing when I started receiving these messages and these visions to really drop out of everything that I was doing, to take a break and to sit with myself and to sit with this question of who am I? And when I started to do that, I started having very radical and energetic spiritual experiences pretty quickly. And I had been medicated for many years since I was a teenager. And at that time, I was going off of all of my medications, and it seemed that a lot of the medicating that was happening was because I was so sensitive, and I was so sensitive to psychic information and to energy and to my surroundings and to other people. And that was kind of misinterpreted as this anxiety or a mental health issue when I was a teenager. And as it as I got off of these medicines, I started having these really authentic experiences just in I'm going to sit and meditate, because I heard, oh, meditation is a thing that you do when you want to like know who you are. So I decided I was going to sit and meditate. And all of a sudden, all this stuff started happening, and I didn't know what was going on. I was very confused, very overwhelmed. There wasn't all of this social media, YouTube. I couldn't just go and search something and try to figure out what was happening to me. But I spent actually a good couple of years really struggling inside of this awakening that was overwhelming. And I didn't really have the context. I didn't have the community. I didn't have the awareness. And then started to receive these messages about being a healer, about being a part of something much greater than just me, about stepping into leadership, about all of these things that seemed so outrageous at the time, because who was I? And I had all these problems. And so that really pushed me forward on this path of seeking teachers, seeking support, learning practices, learning how to manage what was going on inside of me, trying to understand what was happening spiritually and energetically and physically with my body, and then training and seeing where I fit into the path of the healer.
Oh, it's such a curious experience. What you're sharing is with the pharmaceuticals that were on board for some time and then coming off of them. That by itself can be such a challenging experience for people. And for you to actually sit in that discomfort, what inspired you to stay there and learn from it? And it lasted some time, of course. Yeah. Instead of
I
going
remember
back
my mom.
with them
Right. My
pharmaceutical.
mom would say, "You are really not okay. You are struggling. Like, please just take this medicine. Just do something." And I
Mhm.
remember telling her, "No, no, this is important," because I could tell that this bandwidth was opening up. And this is something that feels really important. And when I work with people and teach people, especially with things like qigong and energy practices and working with the nervous system and breath work and all of these things that it felt like my bandwidth was very small, just like that zone of resilience that we hear about as far as where our nervous system is and what we can manage. And so I could manage, I could function, and I might not have the lowest lows, but I also wasn't experiencing the highest highs. And so I started to really experience things that felt like joy, ecstasy, having the beauty of the universe move through my body in some kind of way, having these profound experiences that even though there was struggle on one side of being like, whoa, I've gotten really hypersensitive because I went through a period where I was so sensitive. It was hard to even leave my house. I was really overly sensitive to other people and had to be careful because things would just turn on and I would be really feeling like all of this energy move through me towards doing this healing work with people that I've been called to do. And it was a challenge to manage it. And I think that one of the biggest challenges of going off of medication is that it's like you open up this pipe that's been jammed for a long time with all of these old emotions and things that haven't been felt and haven't been known. And then there they all are at once. And it it takes a lot to be okay with being that uncomfortable. And I think that's just what I was seeking to help myself with was, can I just be with this discomfort? And can I feel these emotions? Can I give myself permission to cry for hours and hours and hours, to really move these things through my body and to learn these different practices using movement and breath and sound and what I was innately doing with my body and in my personal work at home. Can I just give myself that? I think that I was very fortunate and very lucky that I had the space to do that. And I know a lot of people, there's so much going on in your life where you have to go to work and you've got your kids and you've got maybe your family you're taking care of, all of these responsibilities. It's such a privilege and a luxury to be allowed to have just a little bit of space to be with yourself and work on yourself. And I know that I was really fortunate at that time to have that.
Yeah, it truly is a privilege to have that time and space. These synchronicities don't just happen for no reason. So the universe and your spirit know this is the time, and how beautiful. And so from that very significant experience and experiences, or that part of your journey, how would you say that is informed, and it's probably the foundation of the work that you're offering to the community now? Tell us a bit about that, how that came about
Yeah.
for you.
Well, I think that first and foremost, I think that whenever we experience something that is outside the normal or is painful, and we have to really focus on ourselves and healing ourselves, I think that it gives us an incredible amount of compassion, which I
Mm,
think is truly a cornerstone of healing work, is that we're able to be with someone in their darkest place. I think that it is vital that we, through our experiences, sometimes we can understand when someone is going through something that is confusing, painful, just ripping them apart, and we can just sit with it with them and just
mm,
be present with what they're experiencing. We don't need to immediately try to fix it or to sometimes even understand it in order to be with that person and what they're experiencing. Sometimes there is no fixing where someone is, they just are where they are. And I think that being in your own process like that really helps you be able to be with people. And I think that also it forced me to develop a lot of tools and a lot of practices. And I teach a lot of practices and I have so many techniques and tools that I work with the body, a lot of somatic, energetic practices, a lot of shamanic practices to be able to kind of fill the toolbox so that when someone's struggling with something, there's always something that can be done. You don't have to just sit with it, right? Just be with it. And sometimes just sitting with something and just being with something is too much. It's too overwhelming. It's not helpful, actually. You need
Mhm,
to do something. And
mhm.
so then you have all of these practices, these physical practices using movement, breath, sound, ritual work, prayer, working with an altar, working with your guides, working with your ancestors, all of these possibilities to flesh out what is going to be most supportive for each person right this minute. And that is really key and important because we do think sort of it's just something you sit through when I feel like it's more something that you move through.
When you are talking about the somatic work, we had this discussion at our last event. When you have someone who's coming through a journey and in their integration process, we both know that that area is such a lacking area, usually from service centers, from retreat centers. And that's the time we tend to still be very vulnerable because our reality was just shaken, especially with people in a state that this is the first psychedelic experience or their spiritual awakening. And if you were to give one or two tools to someone who's listening and who's, come back from a journey and they're having a hard time connecting back into their reality, the physical reality, what would that be?
I think it's important to remember that a large proportion of people have not actually been in their physical reality, that they've not been
Thank
embodied
you.
very well before that. So a lot of times you go to these medicines because you've had trauma and or you're having a mental health issue or you're going through something intense in your life. And the thing about trauma is that it helps us become very good at dissociation. And it brings us this really helpful tool, especially when we're kids, of being able to leave the body and just not feel things and not be aware of what's going on there. But the body is where so much of our healing is. And so I think, first of all, just to kind of normalize that when you expand your awareness, you are going to probably expand the awareness that you're not in your body. And that is going to feel disconcerting because you might have for the first time this realization of like, where am I? I feel all over the place. I feel not in this system. What is happening? And the nervous system, like we talked about, this kind of zone of resilience of what you can manage, how much stress can come in before you dissociate. You've now had an experience where you've amplified a lot of sensation and a lot of awareness. And so now your nervous system might be saying, hey, it's not really safe to be feeling all of this. I'm afraid that if I feel all of this, it's going to like kind of blow out the system. And
Mhm.
so that process of becoming embodied, it's not something that happens just instantaneously or overnight. It is oftentimes for people, it's this journey of consistently coming back and trying to understand what it feels like sensationally to be in the body and then working with the nervous system to have this communication of I'm okay inside of here, I live inside of here, this is where I belong, I am at my home inside my body. And so just that little conversation with yourself first and foremost of I don't know, it's okay that I'm feeling this uncomfortable. I have not known how to do this. No one told me, no one explained it. It wasn't modeled in my home. This is very new to me. This is very uncomfortable. And I'm still okay. And kind of talking to yourself like you would talk to your toddler. When your toddler is freaking out, which is all that's happening is that you've become overwhelmed, you sit with them and you say, I understand that you're really struggling right now, and it makes sense that you're upset, and I'm here. Do you want this or do you want this? And we give ourselves these very simple little pieces, which are like, the practices that we can remember, which generally, like, we're all these complicated practice, right? Like, I have hundreds of practices I could give you. But the most simple practice, you want to just have whatever you can possibly remember to do, which is generally maybe you can remember to breathe in deeply through your nose and then make a long, slow exhale out of your mouth just to help to activate the parasympathetic nervous system to get you back in your body. And that is it. That's all you've got. And so then you're like, okay, so I've done this. Maybe I'm going to do it 3 or 5 times and see what the result is. And then I'm going to take my hands and I'm going to tap my body. And
Mm,
it doesn't have to be some complicated thing where we know what we're doing. I'm just going to tap my body and I'm going to focus and feel that my hands are touching my body. And then I'm going to
mm,
rub my body and I'm going to
mm,
feel my hands are feeling my body. And then I'm going to feel that my body can feel my hands.
mm,
And as we do that, that's helping our nervous system to regulate and it's helping our brain to release chemicals that are helping us feel better. So we're just going back to soothing ourselves as a baby, as a toddler. Like, what would you do to a baby right now? You're not going to scream at it. You're not going to shake it. You're not going to freak out. You're not going to shame it like, for having a reaction. You're just going to be with it. You're going to be soothing. You're going to talk nice and sweet. You're going to
mm,
maybe lower the lights. You're going to make
mm,
it a comfy spot. You rock it, you pet it, you tap it, rub its back, and
mm.
you make it feel this soothing sensation. And sometimes when we're really like, that's all we have for ourselves. And then maybe you can take your shoes off and put them on the earth and really see if you can't feel the earth, if you can feel the temperature, if you can feel these things. And these sound so silly, right? They sound so basic. But then when you think about it, you're like, why didn't anybody ever teach that to us?
Yes, yes. You just described my morning routine. It's okay. It's okay. You're back in the body. Let me touch my face. I'm like rubbing my hands. I think it's because I've asked the same question so many times. People were doing it in community. One of the things that I learned so deeply about in my DNA from my inside and out and ancestrally, I'm from Iran. And in Iran, I was there for 14 years, first 14 years of my life. And everyone's hugging, everyone's kissing you on the cheeks. People are sitting next to each other, touching shoulders when you're sitting on a couch, or we're sitting on the ground and, bodies are touching each other. There's hugging, there's loving, there's affection physically happening in a beautiful way. And it's such a deep part of the culture that I think it's possibly that the more ancient original cultures just embedded that. They lived in close proximity. We didn't have 5 bathrooms in a house where everybody has a corner apartment in a family. Like a family of 6 or 7 lived in a 2-bedroom home with a big living room. And so I think what's happening right now is that we had that. We separated from that because the American culture is very not that. And then now we are becoming aware that that speaks to my nervous system and that, hey, we got to talk about this and we got to guide humanity on this and we got to teach the young ones and we got to teach our peers about this. Those of us who have been okay being challenged to our core and shaken, to be okay with it, to sit in that extreme discomfort and say, what am I learning here about myself and how can I come through this in one piece? And I see that as an evolution of humanity that's happening. And what a privilege, right? To be at this front of the wave, being the educators, perhaps, in this space. But yet we don't learn it at any point of life.
No, and it's by design. It's very intentional by design. Right now, I'm doing a body of work called Be Human. It's going to be BeHuman.love. We're still in the works, and
Oh.
doing a body of work called Restoration of the Western Soul and Nostophysics. and looking at really how that all of this has been by design, very intentional in the creation of the empire and creation of capitalism, and really ripping humans away from each other, away from this regulating tribal consciousness. And that as Western people, we have been on this path for so long, for thousands of years, of this destruction of this, our indigenous true nature. It's just so far back for a lot of us, especially my people from Europe and the United Kingdom area and all of this. It's as though we've all been on this very dark night of the soul, very
Yeah.
long dark night of the soul that the Western peoples have been on. And through that we have learned a lot. We've really sharpened our intellect and our minds and our scientific awareness and capabilities. But it's time now for us to shift and to come into an integrated way of being, which we all know that in our lives, personally, our lived little lifetime, we will often have that where we go too far in one direction. We have the dark night of the soul. We realize that we're destroying ourselves and maybe others. And then we come back into this integrated place that we never would have been if we hadn't taken that road. And so here we are. And this is where we get to, I believe, step into a new place of collaboration with each other and start to have these vulnerable conversations about these things, about where we went wrong, about what exactly happened to us, about what we're holding, about what we've done to other people's. And through that healing process that each of us individually, but then collectively, we get to come together and find this collaborative way for humanity to come forward. And that to me feels like a big, huge part of the point. I think sometimes we see our life, we see our little life, and like, wow, it's so painful, it's so confusing, it's so messed up out there. Like, look at what is going on, and it's so hard, and so many people are struggling. I think that sometimes when things look very dark, we tend to sit with that. Just why? How can it be so hard? How can God have let this happen? How can humanity be this horrible? How can my life be this hard all the time? Why? We sit with this why of the whole thing. And I think we can get kind of dark with it.
Mhm.
But there is this possibility and opportunity to see this as this great learning and this great transformation, this alchemical process that we've been going through, that now we're starting to be able to just look behind us and recognize what we've been doing. We're just getting to that moment for those who maybe have been having some medicine experiences. And sometimes you have that medicine experience and you sit there and then all of a sudden you feel like you've just been hit by this wave of knowing, and you just like want to hit yourself in the head, just like, okay, I get it. I get why I have like done this pattern over and over. I get why I've been doing this. I get it. I get it. I get it. And you have this amazing aha moment. I think we're just getting to that place where we're collectively starting to have this aha moment.
Yeah.
But then, right, we're talking about the integration of it. Like, how do you integrate that amazing aha that you have in this medicine experience of life? And that is where the work is. That's where the true in the trenches part of transformation is.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that. I think it's so important for us to talk about the this transformation that we are all a part of, and there are a lot of people who are feeling very disconcerted, very dark, very all those things, but knowing that it's part of the transformation, it's all part of it. And so, let's talk about integration. Let's talk about integration. What is integration to you?
I think it's so many things. It is being able to sit with the uncomfortable feelings that have come up, to be with those aha moments, and not just as a now I know something, I'm intellectualizing it, but as
Mm,
something that I am bringing into my body and into my daily life. And how is that changing me? How am I allowing that to change my relationships, the way that I communicate with people? The way that I think so much about integration is how am I allowing myself to be loved and allowing myself to be loving and seeing where all of those little blocks are in myself and then being with the stuff that comes up when I find out like that's sad. That's
Mm.
grief. That's pain.
Mhm.
And giving giving time for those emotions, whatever they are. Just not being like, "Oh my gosh, why aren't I doing this fast enough? Why aren't I healed yet?" Because everybody has that thought. But yeah, this is painful. Like this is sad. And I'm in some ways I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to feel so much. And
Absolutely.
then it's like all of the little diggly things. What are you changing about the way that you, like you said, the way you get up in the morning, what you do before you go to bed, how you eat your food, how you parent, how you have those hard conversations in your relationships. And
Mhm.
those are all of that is integration. And then I work with a lot of people who are having really the more intense kind of spiritual awareness and awakenings, things like psychic, shamanic awakenings, where, oh gosh, now I'm aware that my whole life I've been shutting down my psychic awareness, my things that I see, things that I know. And now that stuff's kind of opening up more. And what do I do with that? What do I do with these pieces that feel not like what everybody else is experiencing, maybe having mediumship experiences, having spirit experiences. And all of that can be very confusing because again, we weren't taught about it. We weren't given any information. Usually the information we were given was that's evil, bad, or wrong. Don't do it. That's not
Exactly.
real.
Mhm.
So then that can be this other layer because I think that there's sometimes we're working with these different things that we're integrating. Sometimes it's like, well, I'm working on loving myself, on, dealing with the trauma of my family systems, on reparenting my inner child. And then sometimes at the exact same time, we're also looking to integrate what is my spiritual experience as I become aware of unity consciousness, that the trees are really alive in a way that I didn't know that they were before, that the grass is actually speaking to me somehow, that the water, the air, the clouds, everything feels more alive to me.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? And how
Mm.
do I talk about that with the people that are around me who didn't have this experience? There's so many layers of
Yeah.
integration, and we discount it as, well, let's just kind of unpack the thing that happened maybe in the ceremony, but it's so much more than that.
So much more. Tell us about that. I've had some friends who've gone through their very significant spiritual emergence and after psychedelic journeys. And man, has it been difficult to reconcile and come back and even be viewed as you're fine. The Western medicine model is so dismissive and views such ways of being as pathologic
Yeah.
that it makes it very difficult for individuals who've had very significant shifts of their reality. I lived a certain life and it was very structured and so forth to, oh my gosh, I'm a multidimensional being. Your entire idea of yourself shatters. And so, to your point, it's very interesting to be able to bring comfort to that and say, no, it's actually okay. You're just fine. You're just
It's
fine.
just human. This is
Hmm.
human. And I think that we forget that. We've forgotten it in some kind of way. And what all that's happening here is that you're remembering that you're
That's it.
human. That's it. You're just remembering that you're human. And all of this stuff is just a part of being human. Extrasensory perception, knowing things, intuition, guides, spirits, teachers, all of these things are actually foundational and fundamental to being a human. And we were terrorized out of believing in that stuff. Terrorized. Our ancestors were terrorized. And not in a just don't do that kind of way like we are now, but extreme things happen to our ancestors to keep them from just connection to the earth, from connection to what the goddess of the harvests and the seasons and the stars and the moon, all of these things that we have such deep connections with innately, that was demonized. And so we're just remembering who we are. So while we remember who we are, we also have to remember that we carry this inherited information and this inherited trauma of, oh no, that's not safe. That's not okay. That's not me. I can't do that. I can't be that. We have to remember that that's residing within us. So we will always have a little bit of this grind around
Mm,
it until we get past the point of that grind. There's this idea of the imperial mind, right, that serves the empire. And the imperial mind will always come in and say, not you, you're crazy, that's stupid, you're making that up, that's not real. It will always do that. And so people, when they come, there are a lot of times like, I'm having these really authentic experiences, but then I also have this part of me that is talking the whole time, being like, you're making this up. This isn't real. You might be completely mad. You belong in an asylum, like all of these things. And I think it's important to understand that is so common, that everybody has that. I have
mhm,
not met anybody who hasn't had that. So know that that's part of it. You're going to have that experience. If you're having it, normal. Absolutely check the box as normal. And then it's like learning how to work with that imperial mind and be like, hey, not helpful right now. I'm exploring this. Have another job, give it another job of something to do. And there is this opportunity then that we get to be more in like, this is what I'm experiencing. This is my authentic experience. I might not understand it right now, but this is what I'm experiencing. And just to give ourselves permission to experience those things. Um, Having a spiritual awakening is often no joke.
mhm,
It will just kind of tear you up, and you don't have someone to talk to
mm,
because a lot of times even your therapist doesn't get it
mhm,
and your family doesn't get it and so on. And I have a lot of clients that are therapists and doctors and come from the Western model and are like, why didn't we learn any of this stuff? Why didn't we learn these energy practices? Why didn't we learn more about the nervous system? Why didn't we learn these spiritual things could be possible, that people are actually experiencing these things and it's normal and healthy? But I think that that's shifting in the
yes,
Western model a little bit right now. And I think that it's also helpful as Western model people to understand that in the origins of science, when we were looking at what is now called science and logic, that the origin story of that was mystical practice, was
mhm,
earth-based mystical practice where people were entering altered states of consciousness. They were doing practices and utilizing medicines to help them to enter into these altered states of consciousness where they were traveling to meet the goddess in the underworld, and she gave the secrets, these
mhm,
secrets of science, which are mystical lineage and tradition. Only
mhm,
we separated them apart. Our ancestors, these original ones, they never could have thought that we become so separated from the earth. They never could have thought we'd become so separated from the cycles and the seasons and the life. They never would have thought that. So science and logic and mysticism and earth-based awareness were hand in hand because there was no separation. You couldn't separate the mystic and the earth from anything because it was just life. But we've become separated and now we're struggling so hard with how do we put these back together? Because oftentimes we want to go, well, let me explain this mystical thing with my scientific mind.
mm,
We have to actually engage the mystical mind. We have to engage the part of us that remembers this, that is in collaboration and can be in this unity and this beauty with science, but it's different from kind of how we want to force it and shove it into science. We want to go, well, well, these molecules are doing these things on these gateways of the brain, and that's creating these chemicals to be released, and then this is happening. And it's like, okay, but that seems like you're working really hard in order to not just like accept that you're having this experience and that this is natural.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you were saying that, it takes me back to I'm reading this book. I also am working on reconnecting with my ancestry, which is the ancient Persians and Zoroastrians. And they were so connected with nature, and they would sit with flowers and meditate with each plant and flower, and they would see the spirit of the flower and have a conversation with it. And psychedelics were definitely used in this tradition called huma, and it was a very internal experience. But yes, their philosophy was, the magi, the mysteries of the magi. The word magic comes from magi, who were these individuals who were very connected with the mystical world, and they were creators. They would be able to move things through from the other world, the mystical world, into manifesting into the physical. And the ancient Greece and Romans, there was a competition. So then with also the rise of Christianity, if you look at the history, they tried to put that, oh, magic is bad. And going to your point of, it's made to be bad for us to be connected with that part of us, which is part of all of us. Um,
Mhm.
it's so interesting. And all at the same time, the Eleusinian mystery rites were going on, where women were holding these ceremonies for 2,000 years for community healing, using psychedelics and mysticism to get people through their fear of death, to really bring healing to the community. And with that, also how we tumbled down with the rise of big religion, just severing us from our origins, of our knowingness that we are nature, that we're here to keep nature beautiful and clean and keep the elements pure. And by doing that, we're doing that for ourselves, and how far away from that we are. And we're coming back to, yeah.
Yeah, and what you're talking about in terms of these meditations with these flowers, with these plants, these days, a lot of times scientists and so on have been, well, how did they know, right?
Mm,
How did these
mm,
ancient peoples, how did these witches know that all of these plants did exactly what we know that they do? How
mm,
did the shamans know to mix these things together to make ayahuasca? Because
mm,
they're like, "It doesn't make any sense. There's thousands of plants. How would they know to do this exact thing?" Which is a very complicated setup to make ayahuasca. How do they
right.
know to extract this poison from a frog and put it in their skin and that was going to help them? How did they know? And there's all of this, well, they must have just been trying everything. Just they were just experimenting all over the place and just
Mm,
seeing what happened and then taking, I don't know, meticulous notes with their not having a written language. They were just somehow passing that on from generation to generation until they figured out every plant that lived near them. No, it was because they were having this real personal, significant communication with each plant, and they were speaking to the spirit and they were honoring the spirit. They were having a reciprocal relationship with the spirit. They would make offerings. They would help it in its environment with, helping it to survive and to prosper. They would sing to it. They would talk with it. They would consume it in great quantities to understand its true essence, even if it was a little bit of a experience, to be able to listen to the spirit and hear what it had to say. And then they would also mix it with other taking other kinds of plants and mushrooms and things that they knew were psychedelic that would help them communicate more easily. And
mhm,
so we know how to do it.
mhm,
And so within that, there's this amazing awareness that we know all the secrets of how to make this world, like you said, to care for it, to tend, to make it beautiful, to make it functional and healthy and safe for everyone and everything.
mhm,
And that is a choice that we're making. And I think that as far as like integration, we need to work on ourselves and do our own work and heal and love and all of these things and find out how to soothe ourselves and heal these wounds and our own illnesses and so on. The next phase of that, the next step of that is really looking at this global context of how are we helping everything to be healthier, everyone to love themselves, and being part of that global community that's really doing good work in that way.
It's beautiful. That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing all of that. And Catherine, before our time is up, I'd love to have you introduce your book to our audience. And maybe, you can let us know how we can find you for your beautiful offerings.
All right. Well, I have the healer's process, which is inner work and skill development to fulfill your sacred purpose. So, anyone who's called to healing work, or just even if you're working on yourself, it gives you a ton of tools. And then I have a companion practice manual, which is 50 practices that go with the text, and they're all listed with the text and referenced in there so that you can do all of these different practices. Just the original book is also has a ton of stuff and practices in it, and it really goes through a body of work that I've been teaching since 2016, and I've guided thousands of people through this work of working on who you are and understanding who you are as a healer, your relationship to that, the really building your energetic core, your central channel, on building your field, understanding cleansing and purification, what that really means, and how its relationship to all healing work, working with your guides and teachers, a sacred container, the directions, all of these external energies, and then understanding what's the authentic medicine that wants to move through you, and how do you accept it, and how do you work with it, and then how do you work with others, and how do you integrate your own experiences and help other people integrate their experiences. So it's a pretty large body of work, and you can find me, Katherine Bird, everywhere. I exist everywhere as Katherine Bird, and katherinebird.com is my website, so I'm super easy to find. And I have a ton of programs and programming. My next offering is a 12-week live course called Heal Thyself, where we work with spiritual, somatic, shamanic, energetic practices. A lot of movement. Sound work is a really big part of this one, vocal sound healing,
Mhm.
working with uh, our own system, and how do we activate that inner healer and heal ourselves, and then bring those practices maybe into our practice with our clients as well. And then there's a ton of other things. I teach so many programs. I teach channeling programs. I teach bringing your work out into the world. And I've got a lot of offerings. I do cohorts, and then I have some things that you can just study on your own if you're interested in things like psychic protection or specific healing practices.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you for creating and expressing all your gifts for all of us to learn from. And I'm so excited to, potentially have you as a guest faculty for the Conscious Physician Psychedelics Academy. That would be amazing. And then people can plug into all of your work as well coming through that and through the podcast. A lot of people tell me that through the podcast, they connect with a particular guest and their life changes. So I hope the listeners hear this and connects with you. Thank you for the work you do
Yeah.
and
And
being generous in sharing.
thank you. And thanks so much for doing this, because I do know how, like, having a place like this, and especially someone like you to come and be able to say, look, I have this background and I have this Western education, and it's not separate. I'm not a separate thing, where this can be an integrated way of being, where you can understand the spiritual and the energetic and the community healing that needs to be done for all of us, and that it's not just what we've been taught and told. We get to be more than that, and I think it's really important that people like you are stepping forward and being the voice that needs to be heard around these things.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I see that in working together is really, I don't see it any other way. It doesn't feel right any other way in that separatist way. And I mean, the things that you do and you teach, and that's the human experience. And I'm like, that's a yes, I want to learn more and more.
Well, one of the things that I am always, always so passionate about in my work and when I teach and stuff is that it's not about me. It's
Mhm.
not about me teaching you how to be me. I am me, and these are the things that I do, and I know these things because of this, but each one of us is unique and has important medicine to bring to the world. And what I am here is to help to like bring that forward and help you to amplify who you are and understand who you are and bring whatever gifts they are to help to flesh them out and to bring you forward. And I think that as a leader, as a teacher, that it's important for us to understand that every single person in the community is extremely valuable, knowledgeable, has wisdom, and has contribution, and that we need to be learning how to lead in a different way. We're all coming together and collaborating and I think that we will go much further, much faster than the model that we've seen so far as I've seen in like coaching and spiritual communities and all of these things where it's just like one person sits at the front and is like, listen to me, and everybody sits there and listens, but doesn't get the opportunity to be and shine and
Mhm.
express and know themselves in context of the community.
Mhm. Mhm. Oh,
So that's something
yes.
I really care a lot about.
Yes, yes, and we're doing it, and we're doing it, and I really feel that in our community, we're leading that, and we're doing it because it's also this is why it's so important to connect with that authenticity and move forward with purpose because that's how we change community, and with changing community change the world. And so the work that you're doing is just fantastic. Thank you for doing it. Thank you for sharing with us today.
Having me.
Yes, yes, it's such a pleasure, and I'm so excited to be with you in our next tier facilitator event as well. Thank you for picking up the spirit part. It's going to be so fun. I have several people that are super lit up about it. So, yeah, thank you, thank you, thank you for today and your energy and time to be continued.
Thank you.
Have a great day.